this at all. There it is. All right. All right. Morning, everyone. Morning, class. Um, Today's the last class before exam, and it's actually a special class for myself. Um, yeah, special class for you too because it's actually the last, the last day, the last class of the semester. So it might be special to you in that way. But for me, today's class is going to be about a special one because it talks about. Are you hearing me? Yeah. Oh, let's just. There you go. All right. Okay. So, yeah, it's a special one because actually it concerns the use of video games in education. And I might have the time to talk to you about that, but video games have played a special part in my personal education as I had the time, during the past year to reflect upon my usage of video games in my life. And yeah, I can draw some clear conclusion about um, what I learn and what I've learned and how I've learned those stuff using video games. So yeah, I wanted to keep that class for the last day of class, the last day of this semester because it's kind of you know uh, it's kind of a topic that I know very well, and I'm trying to know university. There you go. Oops. And I'm trying to understand a little bit more from another perspective, because I know video games from a personal and experiential perspective because I do play a lot of video games. If you didn't knew that, surprise, I do. Yeah, I do play a lot of video games, just like you know a lot of Canadians that was born in the 90s, and I'm including millennials into that statistics too. But yeah, a lot of people just like me have experienced a lot with video games on during their childhood, and as I can speak for myself, video game was not considered something as serious, like we're going to discuss about in a few minutes. And I will explain what I mean by serious. But this was, some more of the most of the time considered as something that is a waste of time or something that was not um, constructive, as I should say. But ooh, that water seemed old. Ooh. Anyways, but yeah, I'm trying to discover another part of video games as I read much more on that topic, and as I'm trying to understand video games and its impact on different perspective, and trying to put aside some of my personal experiences and try to relate on what the researchers have to say upon that. But linkage between my childhood experience with video games and the things that I read in scientific articles or professional articles, there's no way that I cannot relate to what I read and what I've experienced. So yeah, it has played a special role in my childhood education. Not necessarily in class, but um, you don't need to be sitting in front of a teacher inside a school or be inside of a school to learn something. You can learn by yourself at home, in the subway, when you're back home from work, at work. There's um, learning is comes from everywhere, and multiple situations in life. So yeah. So today's class is about, I hope you know now, about video games, and it was kind of difficult for me to actually think of a way to. Yeah, I think that's much better. Yeah, think of a way to talk about video games and not sound like, an activist that trying to change things, or try to change people's mindset about video game, and its impact on learning. I'm not trying to. So I really try to be as much as objective as I can be, since I know it's impossible to be 100% objective. But the fact that I'm addressing my special relationship with video games actually mark a step forward uh, to that objective speech that I'm trying to reach. So, and it's going to be hard for me as well to don't talk too much about video games, because this is something, like I said, this is something that I know kind of very well. I've experienced a lot of video games in my life, during my childhood. I'm still right now playing a lot of video games, and my doctorate thesis is actually concerns the use of video games in history, on learning history. Sorry. So was the relationship between video games and learning history, and developing um, um, competencies and skills. Competencies and skill in there you go. Yeah, competencies and skill that we have to teach and develop among students in a history classroom context. In a Quebec teaching of history context as well. So this is what my relationship with video game is all about. Well, first of all, it's kind of personal, because, like I said, I do have much personal experience with it. But it's also professional, as I have studied, and I'm still studying this phenomenon, as I can say, of video game usage among kids. So yeah, so it has this personal and professional relationship that I have to deal with, and trying to be as much impartial as I can. So if I do say things that you're not agreeing about, please let me know, because we can probably have some misconceptions about video game, and that will be totally normal, because of the treatment that video game have been subject of in the different medias among the past 25 or 30 years, and maybe more. So yeah, it hasn't been yeah. So I try to target some topic that might be interesting, and might also help you to have a better understanding about what video game is, and where the learning comes from when playing video games. We're going to discuss about well, first of all, what is a video game? Because there is multiple way to call it. Digital games. We're talking about serious gaming, which is a concept that is most popular amongst educational scientists and you know educational actors in general. So why integrate video game in education? And video game can be serious too. Like I said, there's this backlash between calling a video game that is used in a class context uh, that is called serious gaming. But what's the point of calling something differently when simply using it in a different context? We will discuss about that as well, and of course, what the researchers have to say on and about the usage of video games. So yeah, this is what we're going to discuss about today. And yeah. So, well, first of all, let's address what is a video game. So, video game is composed of two words, which is, sounds relatively obvious for you, and it is, of course, video and games. Video and game, sorry. So, it splitting this video game word in two distinctive part is actually giving us a better understanding of what a video game is all about. So video is some sort of the medium, as I should say. When I'm talking about video, I'm talking about digital display. So everything that is on screen. Video is, composed with sounds and image. So yeah, the medium is made out of sound and images, and the game, which is the core identity of the activity. So you're playing something that you can see on a TV or on a digital display. So you can visualize and hear what you actually do within the game. But not only see, physically see what you do, but virtually, digitally see what you do. So everything that is, for example, if I'm taking some common card games like Solitaire, I'm not quite sure how to say it in English, but any kind of card game that is actually can be played or is playable on a computer is actually a video game. So yeah, everything that can be played and displayed on a video monitor or a TV is actually a video game. And game being the main, the core identity of the activity, we're going to discuss about what a game is, because understanding what a game is gives us a better understanding of what a video game can have, what effect a video game can have on the learning, and all the other cognitive and other kind of personal and interpersonal development. So game can be defined as an entertaining activity, an interaction between the player and a set of rules that can generate a playful experience. So yeah, entertaining activity and interaction between the player and a set of rules. Some rules might be, and I don't want to be too technical about that, but rules can be either defined by a game itself. For example, I'm taking the Monopoly game. With the rules, it said that you need to use 2 dice in order to define where on the board you're going to move your sorry, um, move your player, as I can say. So yeah, so those rules can be attached with a particular game, like Monopoly. In the within the rules, it said that you have to use 2 dice. So this is, internal rules that are already set by the game itself, but those rules can also be set by the players. So if they want to adapt, or if they want to modify those rules for X, Y reason, the players could decide that either of instead of using 2 dice, we will use 3 dice. So those rules can be set either from by the game itself or by the players, and that can generate, or should generate, a playful experience, because playing a game, it's about having a playful experience. And some authors will even argue that a playful experience is ultimately and fundamentally free. It's something that players can alterate from its original conception without any constraint or any obstacle. So it has to be, a playful experience. If it's not a playful experience, and it has to be also, and some authors also argue that that a game and a playful experience has to be defined by the player itself. A game is not either fun or not fun. It's actually the experience of gaming that is fun or not. So there's no magical recipe for the perfect game, for the the ultimate playful experience. There's no recipe, because otherwise all the game would look the same, and will be built upon that those particular rules. So yeah, and the choices of playing a game has to belong to the players. If someone is obligated or is forced to play a game, well, actually it makes no sense, because no one can be forced to play. Because when you're forced to do something, it's because you don't naturally or instinctively feel the need of playing that game, or playing in general. So when someone is forced to play something, it's actually not a game, because players are forced to, so they initially didn't want to play a game. And this is something, and this is kind of important to note, because this is where the line between a serious game, a called serious called game, and a video games is drawn. So if I take, well, I know we'll get to it later on, sorry, but this is something that you have to remember, that the game experience have to be autonomously defined by the player itself. So if a player do not want to play, then there's no way that he can have a playful, initial playful experience. The player can found some interest in playing a game, when he plays. So progressively, he can find some interest into the playful activity. But fundamentally, if you want to start a playful activity, the player has to be free to participate or not. So this is what defines a game. So over time, the concept of video game have evolved. The concept has evolved through its usage among multiple fields of study. So we can, if I take the educational context and the educational field, educational science field, we will, see video games, serious game, a lot of serious game, and a lot of gamification. This serious game and gamification have been, the one that most likely to be found in the literature on video game studies in education, and also serious gaming, which is a bit more, a bit less frequent. And depending of the meaning, it follows the means. Sorry, it follows it being the video game. Depending of the means, the video games follows when used by individuals and when conceived by companies. This is what defines the appropriate term that we're going to use in different context regarding to the means it follows when it was first conceived, and the means it pursue when it's used in class. So there's two difference between there's two different means when. So first of all, when it's conceived by a company, and when it's used by a teacher or players. And this is those two principal dimensions, as I can call it, as it can call them, dimensions that will define if a video game is a video game, a serious game, is if it's gamification or it's serious gaming. We'll get into it really soon. So yeah, right away. So serious game. What we talk about, what we mean by serious game. It's actually when the initial objective. Well, so when the game is developed by a company or programmers. When the initial objective is to explicitly teach content to the users. For example, I can take the Adibu series, or a lot of video games that have been produced in the second half of the 90s and the first 5 or 6 years of the 21st centuries. There was a lot of serious game that were produced by companies and developed by programmers. So there was a wave of producing of commercial companies producing some serious game, as we now call them today, or educational games, to explicitly teach content to the users. So for example, my intention when conceiving a game or when developing a game is to teach some mathematical concept, multiplication, dividing, sum, and subtraction. Yeah, for example, using slice fraction. Sorry, I need to uppercase. Yeah. So, for example, using slice fraction, which is a game that have been developed by Yulu Lab in collaboration with the University of Quebec. No, the University of Montreal, I guess. I'm not quite sure if it's the University of Quebec in Montreal or the University of Montreal, but anyways, it was developed in Montreal. So slice fraction, which is a mobile application, mobile game that was first conceived and developed and followed some and explicitly followed some serious means, which was teaching fractions. So using slice fraction in class in order to teach mathematical concept would be, we would call the activity a serious game, because the intention when conceiving the activity or conceiving the game itself, the means were or the intentions were serious, to teach content, and the intention when using the activity or when using the game is actually serious again. So when the intention when conceiving and the intention when using the video game are both serious, then we're talking about a serious game, which is different from a video game. Like I explained and like I defined it, video games are initially conceived in order to follow playful means or playful intention, um, generate some fun emotion, playful emotion amongst players. So what this is what a video game is about, and using a video game without any purpose, without any explicit purposes, sorry, of teaching something, would have also to be respected in order to call a video game a video game. So it has to follow, when it's first conceived, it has to follow some playful intention, and when used, it also have to follow some playful intentions. But this is not the case when we're talking about serious gaming, because serious gaming is when a video game is used in a formal context, for example, in a in-class context, or when its usage can have other outcomes than having fun. For example, there's a game, sorry, called This War of Mine, which I will put in italics. So there's this game called This War is Mine, which basically is a game about playing civilians that are stuck inside a city in a war zone during a conflict, military conflict. And your job as a player is to make sure that those civilians take the right decisions in order to survive to this war, or flee the city. So you have to make decisions. Do you choose, for example, to save someone, or leave him dead because you don't want to waste too much of supply for him, or there's some sort of decision that the player have to make, and using this kind of game that was initially conceived to generate some playful experience among its user, despite the fact that the theme is kind of dark and not a theme for a playful experience, as I can say. But it was firstly developed for a playful usage, while it can have some other impact on the user, even though the impact was planned or not. Even though the this video game is used inside or outside of the class, even though if the video game is a teacher has students to play that video game, or either if the students play that video game by itself, it still can have some serious and outcomes. So yeah, like having empathy for civilians who are stuck in war zones. So that will have eventually an impact on the choices that are going to be made by the players. So the player have to think of the consequences of its own actions, which is what we call empathy. But it can develop multiple other kind of skills, cognitive and cognitive skills. But the intention when conceiving the games, this game was actually to be like a playful experience. But the intention when using the activity can be serious. Like if I'm a teacher and I'm asking my students to if they want to play that particular kind of video games. So if I'm doing that, if I'm asking my students to play that particular video game within a more formal context, within a more educational context, it would have some impact, some outcome on learning on the users, even though the activity or the video game wasn't at first conceived to generate some serious outcomes. Um, so, and when we talk about, and finally, we also see a lot of the gamification concept, which is the intention of adding playful mechanism into an activity that follows formal intentions, other than to play. For example, using application to motivate people or students to make some physical activities, which actually be some sort of gamification. So yeah, so for example, I'm developing an application that is meant to generate some empathy amongst the player, but keeping in mind that the usage can be also playful. When I use the activity or when I use the game is actually within a playful context, but still the intention that are hidden inside the video game are more serious. I can think of an application on a mobile application that's called Zombie Run, I guess. This is the first example that comes to my mind. That's actually designed to simulate. You put your earbuds in your ear, plugged into your phone, start running and start the application, and you can hear zombies sounds that are you hear them far or from a shorter distance, regarding to the speed you're running. So this kind of mechanism actually stimulate adrenaline, yeah, of course, but it's also meant to give people or give its user some, I wouldn't say excuse, but some kind of motivational reasons to do some physical exercising. So yeah, for example, using an application to motivate people to make some physical activities, and the intention when conceiving the activity can be serious, or the intention when using, and the intention when using. Yeah, I can hear you then. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, I muted my microphone. Sorry. So I was still talking all this time. Yeah, and I was talking all this time. So basically, what you just missed is I talked about video games and what and how video game can be defined, and what the difference between like some other similar concepts that we might see when we're talking about using video games in within a more formal, as I can say, context. For example, serious game, gamification, and serious gaming were the concept that I just talked about. So yeah, today's class is about video games. Do you have children that were, that have a particular relationship with video games at home? Yeah, we all have this. Yeah, yeah, and I'm here to and I introduced this class while talking about my personal relationship with video games and how it shaped my childhood, pretty much, and pretty much some other kind of learning that are actually useful today. And I had the time to take a step back into those experiences and figure out that video games might have played, have been a big part of some of the learnings that I've made during my childhood experiences, and I'm trying to relate those experiences with what the researchers have to say on that particular topic. So yeah, this is where I was to discuss. Yeah, I started a little bit late because I had an appointment this morning, and it lands a little bit longer than I expected. So yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So you didn't miss pretty much this point. So yeah, I thought that the difference between video game and serious gaming, which are basically viewed as opposite, as I can say, when it comes the time to use it, video games are in class, which video games follow some intentions of playful intentions when first conceived, when those games are developed, and the intention when using those video games are also meant to be playful. So playful meaning when conceiving a game, uh, adding it to a playful intention when using the game is actually what defines a video games. And long story short, a serious game is when the intention when conceiving that video game is actually to follow some serious means, for example, educational purposes. And the intention when using the activity, or when using, sorry, that serious game is also serious. This is when we talk about serious game. So this is the difference between serious game and video game. But this is the difference that literature and authors in educational sciences are making between video game and serious gaming. While when taking a closer look to it, there's not much difference between a video game and a serious game, because it might be hard to put video games in only one of those categories, either if it's a video game, a serious game, gamification, or a serious gaming, because the outcomes of video game doesn't come from the game itself, but the way that it's used and the intentions when using it. For example, Minecraft was, before it's been integrated more frequently in classrooms, was first considered as a video game, but since it's more and more used within an educational context, so either if it's inside or outside of the classroom, is Minecraft now considered as a serious game? Does the game itself have, changed the way we perceiving it? Because it's actually used in other contexts than more traditional gaming context, like at home or on a couch with friends. So this is the first question that I'm asking myself when people are calling video games or simply using the concept of serious games, because it's kind of hard to say that Minecraft have become more serious, like if the game has gained some maturity, or or evolved into something or an activity that is more serious. And I'm quoting the word serious because there's some of a negative, uh, it has a negative impact on the way that we see video games. it's like saying that video games are bad because they are, a waste of time, and serious game are actually uh, serious. Like they're, you know, they're more a more important activity than a video game can be. But what's the difference between using Minecraft at home and using Minecraft in class? Beside the fact that the uses of Minecraft in class is not the player's choices, but the teacher's choice. So basically, there's no differences in the game design, or the differences are um, neglectable, as I can say. So yeah, but does it even matters? Putting video games in those categories, doesn't does it even matters to say that a game is a serious game or more classical video games? Does it even matter to say that some video games can have serious means, or can pursue some serious intentions or serious outcomes? Does it even matters? Because we would have to pursue researches for every video game that exists today on the market, and trust me, there is too much to achieve that kind of intention. So but does it even matter putting video games in different categories, defining video games either serious activities or not? Well, for myself and for many other authors, it doesn't really matter to call a video games a serious game. Well, and it actually can have some negative impact or negative effect, or it can be also a misleading way to call video games serious games. Because regarding psychological theories on learning by playing, you might have learned some psychological and social psychological theories um, that I have identified some mechanism in playing that can foster students' learning. But do we call a game, more classical game or a playful experience of kids uh, inside the school's wall? Do we call that a serious game, or we still call it a game, just like normal children used to play? So it doesn't really matter how you name a video game that you use in class. And I feel that it is important to first address that because um, we're kind of reluctant about the word video game. We don't really, and by we I mean people in general, um, don't really like the fact that the word video game, or the concept of video games, because of all we hear on media and all the negative impact that we hear about the video games, and some of them are not even have not even been proven. But first of all, you don't have to, and it is even more important if you teaching to kindergarten students, that you don't have to fear the word play. You don't have to fear the word game, and you doesn't even have to fear the word video game, because by itself it's gaming, and playing is the first human way of learning. So and it doesn't mean that if you past a certain age you stop learning if you play. That's not simply not true. So regarding psychological theories on learning by playing, it doesn't even matter to call it video games or a serious game, because the action of playing itself, without playing a desired or outcome, is considered as something worth doing for learning, at least. And the other factors or influential factors that comes uh, in play are also, the time spent with that particular video game, or there's always a balance of things in life. Like, you can be spending 12 hours playing video games a day for a week. It will have eventually negative effect on your mind, on your physical and mental health as well. Just like if you work 12 hours a day, will also have a physical and mental effect on human beings. So everything is in the balancing those activities. But this being said, this is partly why the arrival of concepts like serious game is so controversial among scientific communities, because by saying that games can be either serious or not, it actually means that, if the action of playing a video game doesn't follow or doesn't pursue some serious meanings, well, this means that the activity or the video games is not worth playing, it's not worth doing, but and or doesn't have any serious or educational outcomes, which is, like I said, simply not true. So, and it doesn't contribute much to the scientific findings, though, on video games and education, to have that backlash between that conceptual kind of way of calling things, like if they are video games or serious games. It's actually doesn't even matter to the scientific community, because there's we cannot, argue that what we call serious games have more or a better, impact on learning than classical or traditional video games. So that's simply not true. So instead of seeing video games as serious or not, we should analyze what components makes a video game best suited for educational purposes. This is something that is important to look at. If we're taking the example of Assassin's Creed, what makes Ubisoft, the company, video game company, Ubisoft, what justified their choices of making a game that looks like Assassin's Creed Discovery Tour, best suited for educational purpose. These, the arrival of that video game that is dedicated for an educational usage, actually followed a numerous of decision on the gameplay, on the theme that were addressed in that game, on the possibility, player possibility with, about interaction within the virtual world. All of those decisions while designing the game actually have an impact on the experience outcome, the students' experience outcome on using that particular video games. And this is something that research have to focus on, that not, taking putting games in different boxes, putting video games in different boxes, and say like, this game is not suited for educational purposes because there's violence in it, or yeah, this game is best suited for educational purposes because it was designed by educational scientists, or or it has a stamp on it that says that it's a serious game. So this is much more of a branding kind of thing than simply you know really serious or not. So yeah, we should instead analyze what component, for example, is it best suited for educational purposes to have a video game that is um, that gives the control of a single perspective of a single player that you control, or is it best suited for educational purposes to have a game where you can manipulate a lot of your environment, or you can interact with your environment and with other people inside the game. So we must take into account those particular component of video games before introducing them into the classroom, and before also considering them well suited suited for the classroom. So if you do have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me at any moment. So yeah, we must then have a closer look at the. All right, cool. So we must then have a closer look at the video game's design. Like the gameplay. Is it hard to master? I don't remember who said that. But I think it was one of the creator of the Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, or Mario Brothers. Well, some influential person in the video games industry said that a video game is all about easy to learn and hard to master. And that quote kind of, it rings a bell in my head, which, well, education is all about that. Learning mathematics, it's all about finding a best way to give accessibility to the mathematical content or mathematics concept to the students, to make them accessible for those students, and eventually become better and better. But the part where you learn mathematics by traditionally learning mathematics is the same process than the process of learning how to play a video game. So yeah, we must then have a closer look to at the video game's design. So and the gameplay, the perspective of view. Is it three-dimensional, two-dimensional? Is it a single actor perspective? For example, in Assassin's Creed, you control one character, you become that character, that person, and you navigate through the virtual environment. Or on the other hand, Sid Meier's Civilization, which is a turn-based strategy game, whatever, that allows the user or the player to actually take control of an entire civilization. So it can manipulate, or it can see the virtual environment differently. And this is something that is to take in consideration when introducing a game inside a class. It's like, does the video game design, like how it is presented and how it is playable, does that have, and how this have an impact on students' learning? And at from until today, there's not much of researches that showed interest into finding what are those particular element of video game design that actually foster or impede on the students' learning. So, perspective of view, its social component. Does the game allow players to chat between them inside or outside of the game? The pace, can the game be put it on pause or for some other game like Call of Duty, uh, the reaction is actually more important and is actually a component that will make the player successful or not. Is this something that I want into the video game that I wanted to use in my class or not? What are the themes that I use? Are the themes are too violent? Are they appropriate for the audience? Are the theme best suited for our curricular purposes? For the educational matter that we have to teach in class. You know, this is everything. The content, the ESRB rating, is it everyone, E for everyone, T for teen, or M for mature? So, you know, this is something that we have to take a closer look at in order to better understand what's the linkage between a video game design, video games component, and the impact on learning and how actually the interaction of the player while using the video games is actually going to define the educational outcome. This would explicitly explain why a video game like Assassin's Creed might be best suited for the classroom than Call of Duty for a lot of those reasons. Don't worry, I'm not trying to say that Call of Duty is best suited for teaching purposes, and of course it's not. Yeah, and yeah, and I know it's hard, you know, to actually understand what the video games, what the effect of video games are going to be on your kids' learning. But yeah, yeah, mhm, yeah, 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 and this is and yeah. Yeah. And you know, this kind of thinking is actually something that is useful. You know, the fact that Donas was actually saying to me that our kid was playing a lot of video games, and he wanted to be a video game programmer so he can make the game he plays better games. So this kind of you know, perspective on its own experience is actually called metacognitive skills. It actually it is actually the ability of, you know, looking at an activity or looking at a situation or a context and thinking of how it can be better or how it can be improved, understanding the in-game mechanics that, you know, define the video games, and actually thinking of a way that this game can actually be or produce a better gaming experience. And this is some very interesting skills that video games allow the players to develop, because it can be transferred in other aspect, other sphere of his own life. For example, he might be in a mathematic class and looking at a mathematic problem and analyze the problem regarding of, what can, or what strategies that, or what are the strategies that I can use in order to solve that problem, because video games, it's all about solving problems. It's about what can I do in order to achieve my goals, the goals that I have personally set it, or the goals that are set it or implemented uh, in the core identity of a video game. So these cognitive skills can actually be transferred into real life situation, and this is where the learning by using video games comes to begin really interesting. So yeah, if you do have ever observe or see that kind of transfer, transferring your kid transferring that kind or that particular skill into real life situation. I'm not quite sure if this is something that you have already observed. Sorry. So maybe you be I don't know, be looking at him playing video games and ask him why you do that, and why you doing those kind, why you're doing those kind of steps, and he will be probably be able to actually tell you and explain you why he's doing those steps, and what goals he actually pursue. I'm not quite sure, Donna, if you saw that kind of transfer uh, in you know a real life situation, as I can call it. I'm not quite sure if my question was clear enough. Yeah, you actually. So you saw that, skills he developed while playing video games, cognitive skill or cognitive ability that he developed while playing video games. You actually saw how he can transfer those skills into real life situations, right? So yeah, and yeah, yeah, uh huh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah, because and like I just said, that we have to take a closer look at video game design. What's the component that make a video game in order to really understand what the outcome of those in-game design have on learning. Like, you're talking to me, you're telling me about Minecraft having a, I would say, better impact, as I can put inside quote marks, better impact playing Minecraft than playing, for example, Call of Duty. And this is some of the reason why we're putting forward the use of Minecraft instead of the use of Call of Duty for kindergarten students, and for other reasons like ESRB rating and stuff like that. So but most importantly, playfulness is a subjective feeling that doesn't have shared universal components among all individuals. That means I personally hate Fortnite. Well, Fortnite is or was one of the most popular video games of amongst today's kids. So um, so it so yeah. Um, so it doesn't mean that a game is is fun for some people, that is actually fun for everyone. Playfulness is a subjective feeling that doesn't, have some shared or universal components among all individuals, or amongst all students, or amongst all children. Yeah, like I said, I personally hate Fortnite, but it's one of the most popular video games. Video game. Why? I do have some personal theories about that, and some particular concern that we will maybe have the opportunity to discuss if you're interested to. But yeah, playfulness is a subjective feeling, so it doesn't mean that if you're telling your class on a morning that you're going to use Minecraft inside your classroom, it doesn't mean that everyone will love playing Minecraft. So, you know, the basic, yeah, uh huh, because yeah, because you saw some positive purpose in playing those games, right? But it wasn't my case. Unfortunately, when I was playing World of Warcraft with my friends, when I was a teenager, so yeah, I had a couple struggle. I had struggled trying to argue why I do play World of Warcraft, while my mom was trying to say, and my dad was trying to say to me that I needed to go out, play outside, and play outside with and socialize with other kids. While World of Warcraft, which is an online game, and cooperative online game that allows me to play with millions of people around the world, and trying to use a second language, English language, in order to communicate with my teammates. And it adds some beneficial outcomes for me. But does the benefit from playing World of Warcraft equals the time that I have invested in that particular game? Now we can argue on that, but but no, yeah, 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 yeah. Uh huh. Uh huh. The fact that we don't actually know who are the people that are, yeah, yeah. And of course, this can be something that might frighten parents, of course, and for some legitimate reasons. But this is the same, fear that drives parents to look on every candies when we're treat and treating in the Halloween, or yeah, and or telling kids that do not go inside a car, some people's car that you don't know who they are. So yeah, so there is some fears and concern that are the same kind of fear that comes from the fear of not knowing who, and not knowing the intention of the others. But that fear is transposed into a video game environment. So yeah, and this is something that it is, yeah, of course, legitimate, and it's as its reasons. But at the same time, um, when I'm playing World of Warcraft, no one knows where I personally live. Um, so yeah, that kind of anonymous aspect of video games, that it's beneficial for that point. Yes. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Uh-huh. But you cannot, I mean, you cannot have or you cannot force them to not play with, not do some online interactions with other players. This is something that is fundamental with video games. This is not something that you can uh, im- yeah, um, yeah, you cannot stop that actually, but the point would probably be talking about those kind of stuff, and maybe it's and I'm thinking aloud. This is maybe you know the school's job. Maybe it's going to be the school's job to address those kind of concerns, just like it's a school's job to introduce some sexuality or uh, other ethical or moral topic with children's with students. So yeah, this is something that we will have to discuss with our students. Teaching teaching with video games doesn't always mean using a video game in class in order to foster some other learnings. It also means that you can use the video game as a discussion starter to discuss about, for example, the representation of the female characters in video games that might be concerning, and you have to address those kind of questions with the students, because video games is part of their life, is part of their own culture. I think it's in in fourth slide I will discuss about that. But you cannot stop them for playing video games, but you can talk with them about those kind of concerns and those kind of questions that can affect their prior knowledge on for example gender equality or other social attitude that they can develop while playing those games. If your kids keep insulting is the teammates he's playing with, it might be a good opportunity to introduce with him the importance of treating people with respect, regarding yeah, 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 it's getting too serious. Yeah, yeah, but this is something that, even though you stop him for playing those games, when you see that kind of behavior, it actually won't have any effect on the recurrency of that particular behavior. But making transferring that kind of behavior that might sound, when you're playing a video game, you don't have in mind that your words can actually hurt people. You're just playing video games, and maybe you're being too competitive with yourself, and being too hard with your teammates. Yeah, exactly. So, and this is the exact same thing than in life. Instead, in real life, and for example, you're playing team sport, or you do an assignment with colleagues, or simply participate in a in class conversation, that you have to actually develop some proper social skills, and those social skills first starts with how you treat other people while playing video games. So this might be something that you can talk with your students in class, like asking, for example, who's playing Fortnite. So people will raise their hand. They will talk about their experience, and sometimes maybe students will say that, oh, I really hate when my teammates are bad because I don't like playing with bad people, and blah 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 blah. And then you can introduce. What if, for example, you're teamed with your friend that is not, as good as you in mathematics, and you do have to work on a mathematic assignments. What would be your behavior with that person? Why it is different to treat people? Why you treat people differently while playing video games and working on an assignment in class? So this, video games can not only be used as a medium for learning, but also as a topic of discussion that can, be linked with some topic that you will have to discuss with your students at one point. Yeah. And the reasons why we should be seriously considering the implementation of video games, like I said, not only by playing them, but also as a topic of or discussion starter with your students. Inside the curriculum, go far beyond the fun aspect that can motivate students, because the main arguments being like, yeah, you should introduce video games in your teaching because children love video games, but they love doing other things that we will never consider integrating it into the curriculum. But yeah, that goes beyond the fun aspect of it, because for kids, video games are more than an activity or a hobby. It's part of a whole generation's cultural identity. This is, from video games, they do discuss a lot. They do link some, I'm a member of a Facebook group, of a meme Facebook group, actually. And people are posting meme about topic, about the news that they read or that they hear about, and they can clearly make a clear link with video game topics. So they're using a video game topic or video game content in order to share a message that is related with some political, social, cultural, or etc. Concern that is more, as I quoted, serious. So yeah, for kids, video games are really part of an old generation cultural identity, and not having in mind how important video games are for those kids is actually going off the track of the educational mission, which is, make sense of what you say inside of the class for those students, for those kids, for that generation of gamers. So this is a part of the reason why we should integrate video games in education. But for the records, I have here some stats about. Is it big enough? No, I have to enlarge this. Yeah, 140%. It's perfect. So, yeah, video games as a part of today's kids' cultural identity. If we take, for example, a survey in Canada in 2017. Sorry. Yeah, 2017, not only in Canada, but worldwide, there was 2.2 billions, with an S, I guess, users. Yeah, 2.2 billions video game users around the world. I don't know how many people there's on Earth, but if there's 10 billions of people, that means there's 22% of humans that's playing video games, and all age groups are concerned with that stats. 52% of Canadians consider themselves or are considered as gamers, while 49% are women. And this is something I want to stress out, because for too long we targeted a particular gender as gamer, in our conception of what a gamer is, we saw that, yeah, that guy, that teenager male, sitting in his couch eating pizza, and yeah, and doing other illicit, well, not so illicit nowadays, but activity. But yeah, 49% are women. So saying that, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, because back in, for example, 1990s, the mastering of video games implies different kind of skills or different kind of abilities, or competencies. But nowadays, with the variety of video games, we have simulation video games where you play the role of a mayor, in city mayor, or other action game like Call of Duty, or other games like Farmville. That mobile games that you keep receiving Facebook notification that is really annoying about if you want to be my friend or not on Farmville, please, I don't want to receive that anymore. I don't really care about that game. But anyways, with the variety of video games that exist today, there's is you know I would say almost a game for everyone. Just like movies were basically, romantic movies at the beginning of the film industry. While they, it diversified the offers of films for the second half of the century. But since 52% of Canadians considered as gamers, so 40% are women, and the big difference between if the big difference between women and men are in the kind of video games. So men's were be likely to be more attracted with fast-paced video games like action games, sports games, war games, action shooters, or medieval kind of things. While women will be more attracted with less competitive and more slower paced video games. So it might have some differences, but this is slightly representative. 81% of 13 to 17 years old Canadians plays video games. 81%. So 8 kids out of 10. That's a big numbers. That's a big number in 2017, and that number trend to be even more higher. So for today's kids, it's even more than that. And with video games, they can learn, for example, initial knowledge and construct. For example, I'm playing Assassin's Creed, which is a video game that is an historical background, historical themed game. So it has in its own experience of video game, of that video game. It has some history concept, some history name, or historical people, and those actually will have an impact on how gamers and students, when they're in class, how those kids are actually seeing the content, or the knowledge that will be taught in class. So this will have an effect. Motor, cognitive, and social skill. Motor, because for example, the NI coordination, being able to press the right button without constantly looking at the controller, or for example, the ability of driving a car in video games, and while you want to turn left, you don't turn your whole body to the left, but only your thumbs are pushing the joystick left. So yeah, those kind of motor skills can be developed in and while playing video games. Like we talked about earlier with Donna, some cognitive skills and social skills. Those can be developed by playing video games, and but this doesn't mean that those skills will be, well developed. If that experience is not guided, or it's not, you don't have a reflective feedback, or a thinking about that experience, this might not have the expected or a positive impact on social abilities and of course behaviors. So video games as a way to give sense to the knowledge they learn in school. For example, a student who plays Assassin's Creed at home would be more likely to know more and relate more to the game's particular time in history during in-class content. These have been documented, and this have been addressed in a research amongst Quebec students. So yeah, it will have effect on the prior knowledge, or it will actually give sense to the knowledge they learn in school. Other example is in order to succeed in a game called Kerbal Space Program, I think it's called this, but you have to understand some physics concept. For example, gravity, acceleration, g-force, some sort of content that you have to master in order to be successful in that game, which is a game that was not dedicated or meant in the initial development phase to be used in a class or for teaching purposes. So you need to, have those prior knowledge, those physics knowledge, in order to be successful to the game. So if the students haven't, seen or haven't learned that knowledge in school, then he will have to, engage himself into self-learning in order to progress in that game. And with that kind of self-learning comes, frustration and some natural reaction of the human when facing a difficult task. But like the proximal development zone theory says that learnings come from situation where the task is too difficult to be completed with the initial knowledge and by the students itself. It has to stimulate some new skills, or integrate some new knowledge that the students or the player don't already have. So yeah. So video game can be serious too. All right, and this is why I really hate that serious game concept kind of thing, because this is something that have been invented in order to stress out the fact that some games can have positive, sorry, learning outcomes amongst players, which is basically the case with every game, either it's not if it's serious or not. So ironically, if some found the need to distinguish a serious game from a video game, it's because video game is not, well, instinctively for most people, or socially seen as a serious activity. Maybe this trend to change over time as the research get clearer and clearer on the effect of video games and who plays video games. But This is something that is commonly shared among people, that playing video games is not a serious activity, which, no one will argue the fact that if their students or their children go play outside at any game that is not a video game, is considered as, a productive or a serious activity, because learning is basically the first way. Playing is actually the first way of learning for humans. Serious is given to an activity when it follows other means than having fun, like I said. But serious in education would refers to the educational potential of a video game, which, basically every single video games has a potential to generate or, foster some educational outcomes. So by itself, the concept of serious is just obsolete, because serious and video games are related, or, saying exactly the same things. It's a positive means added to an activity like video games that shares not the same this oops not the same level of enthusiasm when used within a more traditional context. For example, using Minecraft in class would be considered as a serious activity, while using Minecraft at home would be considered, for the general population, as something that not serious. Why? There's absolutely no reasons that, or at least no rational reason that can explain that. It's simply a way that society have decided to, or not so decided, to see video games. This is the representation of video games among society. So it, adding serious to video games actually means that, well, at first video games are not serious, then we will have an educational value to it. So it will become serious, which, it's kind of absurd. And even when used not seriously, like I said, within a more traditional context, video games can have outcomes on players. Depending on the genre, the game design, the social and game and out-game features, and all of the personal and social characteristics of a video game experience. Because, video games is not, by itself something serious or not serious. Is the use that we make of that video games that, can generate educational outcomes or not. So I'm on slide number 22. Yeah, I'm going a little bit faster because I'm watching time flying by. all right all right, so yeah, I'm now on slide 23. So it's even more important to take a closer look at the effects of video games on players if we want to evaluate the safest I didn't know what word to use. So if we want to evaluate the safest way or the best way, this is why I use the word safest. I didn't want to use the best word. So the safest way to introduce video games in class, because there are multiple reasons that explain why video games are not more frequently used in class. This is not because the impact on learning of video games haven't been proven over time, but it's for reasons like teachers not understanding or not being themselves players. I read a paper where the author said that sorry, 96, I think it was 96% of the teachers that introduced video game in their classroom were themselves gamers. So yeah, with the other institutional reasons like not having the appropriate technological tool, or not knowing how to use it, or there's multiple reasons to explain that. But one of those reasons is the lack of researches on actually what mechanism actually impact on cognitive process or cognitive behavior. So yeah, this is something that we need to look further on, is that what mechanism or what makes a video game best suited for classroom. Is it because a video game promotes a competitive dimension or have a social dimension, or is it because it's a single player experience, a multiplayer experience, or is it because it's on PC, on console? Is it because it's played at home, or because it's playing inside a class? It's because there's multiple reasons that we must investigate in order to better understand what's the impact of video games in learning. But one thing I'm quite sure is that video game will be part of the school curriculum eventually. Will be explicitly teach, just like programming or coding, just like cyber security, just like all those digital stuff that school, on a personal editorial note that I found is a little bit off the track on that point. So learnings made at home, playing video games, will have an influence over a student's prior knowledge content taught in class. So this is why we need to have a better understanding of what's the impact of those video games experience have on the students' prior knowledge when they come in class with sometimes the appropriate prior knowledge, and sometimes knowledge that we have to deconstruct in order to allow those students to learn properly learn content. For example, history and social sciences and the popularity of history themed video games among teenagers make that point a little bit more concerning. Maybe students would think that when playing Call of Duty, maybe students would think that this is how army and soldiers actually making war, but this is two different, completely different reality, and we have to address that kind of questions so they have the right knowledge on stuff. So what is to consider when using the video game for educational purpose? Well, first of all, of course, like always, take a look at your pedagogical intentions and curriculum content. For example, are you planning to use Minecraft in class because you want to develop some cognitive skill on volume concept, or on gravity concept, or you want to introduce that video game as a discussion starter. So this is something in order to address it's a discussion starter in order to address some more sensible theme that might be hard to talk with younger students. The role given to the video games in class, like I said, are you teaching with or teaching about that video games? And what researchers has to say about the use of video games. Yeah, and let's get into that real quickly, even though I've talked a lot about video gaming as a relatively new field of study. As a science, there's a science now that study the use of video games. Researches have been made on video games since, I would say, since the early 90s. So researchers researches have been made on video games in the sociology, psychology, and media and communication, and now educational field. Most documented topic in the is the in-game violence and the video game addiction. Those kind of popular beliefs. Um, and both haven't yet been proven to be caused by video game exposure or video game usage. It doesn't correlate it. It doesn't mean that because your kids are playing Call of Duty, they will become, you know, a violent person. This is something that we have to, break in people's mind. And also video game addiction. I know people that are addicted to sport, as the OC, the OCDE. I'm not quite sure in English what's the acronym, what's the word for that organism, but is the health organism are considering sports to be an addiction. I don't think so. So yeah, basically everything can cause addiction, and yes, video game included. I myself have to control my the time that I spend with playing video games, because yeah, I tend to play a lot of video games, but I'm aware of that. It doesn't mean that I have to stop playing video games. I simply have to better make a better usage of it. So yeah, both of them haven't been proven to be caused by video game usage, even though those are the most documented topic in the video game studies. Yeah, even though this is something that not have been proven through, they keep doing researches because I don't know why. uh, some people really think that video games is evil incarnation. Yeah, researchers now shows that video gaming can play a role in learning, so in both in home at home or in class. So basically three kind of cognitive processes. The executive functions, which like we discussed about, like taking sorry, I read something really interesting. I want to share that with you. But yeah, like NI coordination, like let's say yeah. There you go. Yeah. So yeah, executive function and also metacognition, which basically the ability of the player to look on that situation inside a video game experience and say what choice do I have to make, what path will I choose to follow, the A solution or the B solution. This is something that players have to constantly reflect when they are gaming, when they are playing video games. And yeah, this is part of metacognitive ability and self-regulation, which is basically can be defined as the ability of learning by themselves, or learning from the past experience in video games in order to transpose those experience into another context. Either it is another video game context, or in-class situation context, or a real life situation. So yeah, because for example, I'm playing Mario Brothers, and from in the first stage, I forgot to and I jumped on a piranha plant. So I die. I lose the game. I do it a second time, and now I have learned that if I jump on a piranha plant, I will eventually die. So I will have to jump over it. Well, of course, in real life situation, it's hard to to find a context where you will have to jump over a piranha plant. But this was a simple example of what self-regulation can be present in the video game experience. So um, yeah, I can, yeah, for the self-regulation example, I can say that if I'm playing Minecraft and I decide to build a pyramid, then I will have to, well, first of all, I'm doing like without even thinking. So I'm placing blocks, and finally realize that uh, was mathematically incorrect the way that I have built the pyramids. So it is not symmetry. The pyramid is not going to be not going to look good at all, because I haven't made prior calculation of how many blocks I would need to build that pyramid. All those mathematic reflection or thinking that I have to make prior to constructing that virtual pyramid. And so when I come in class and I have to draw a square, then I will reflect on that gaming experience and say, oh yeah, I do remember when I spent 3 hours building a pyramid that was even not good looking, because sides were not equals. So I know that if I want to draw a perfect square, I have to first take measurement. So this is some kind of self-regulation. But the gaming experience itself will force the player to learn in order to be successful, because otherwise you will keep getting frustrated and at some point you will stop playing. So and then you will stop learning. In addition to that, Greenfields, and I like that. Is that the quote I was looking for? Yeah. So yeah, Greenfields sees video games as vehicle for cognitive socialization. So where students can develop their social skills in order to socially construct their knowledge, either if it's about the game's mechanics or the in-game content. I'm going to give you two relevant example of that. When I was younger, I played a game called, and they made a movie on that game. It was called Silent Hill. That horror movie of a girl that is lost in a city, in a weird city where there's fog and monsters and stuff like that. So and in that kind of game, decisions you're making, for example, spending your ammunition on a monster that you could have easily éviter. So yeah, instead of shooting that monster, you will, for example, keep those. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Instead of that, you would shoot that monster and lose a lot of ammunitions. But I didn't realize every action that I've made inside of that game has an impact on my future progression in that game. So I, I've learned that managing, health potions and, managing my inventory, the items I have in my inventory was actually a good way to succeed in the future of that game. So, and I love to look for the walkthrough of a game. What step do I have to make in order to be optimizing my success in a game? So I this kind of game, that kind of learning, um, forced me to actually go look on the internet for the game solution, the game walkthrough, the best way to succeed into that game. So even though there was, even though Silent Hill is a single player experience, that means that there's no way that I could possibly have an in-game interaction with other people. That was, in real life person. There was no mechanism that allows that kind of social skills, but instead there was a community on, for example, internet, on Reddit, on YouTube, on Facebook, a group of people that gathered together in order to talk about that game and talked about the best way that that game can be, um, 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 the best way that you can succeed in that game. So that social aspect of a game, even there's no social mechanism inside of a game, trust me, there is a community of player on the internet for every single game that exists now on the market, and trust me on that. This is something that researchers on video game have, documented a lot, that I've talked a lot about, is that the fact that players feel the needs of sharing their own success, or looking out for others, um, suggestions or conseil, tips about how to succeed in that game. So even though there's no social mechanism, for example, a multiplayer experience, a cooperative experience, an online experience, or in-game chat mechanism, even though there's no such mechanism, in-game mechanism like that, there will be eventually, you know, um, um, there will be an emergence of that need of players to, gather together and talk about the game. So yeah. And they're not only talking, and trust me, they're not only talking about the game and how good the game are and how good the game is. Gamers are, by nature, I'm trying to wait my words, are highly, they're passionate, and they're highly reactive to, and even negatively and positively, to a game. So if there's flaw in the in-game gameplay, or in the logic, or in the story, in the story, sorry, yeah, there will be a discussion about that. There will be a natural social emergence of that need that players feel to talk about that game with each other, with people that actually can understand their situation, because they are in the same social group, because they do play video games at first, but most importantly, they do play the same video games. So yeah, this is a common phenomenon. Other authors argue that the main outcome of playing video games relies in the problem solving skills, because a game itself, in its fundamental means, is all about solving a problem. When when I see piranha plant in front of me when I'm playing Super Mario Brothers, this is my problem, and how I'm going to solve that problem is actually how I'm going to what moves are going to be made in order to successfully jump over that piranha plant and not stepping on. So players have to analyze, evaluate, find a problem and a solution to that problem, and sometimes reinvest that process later on his gameplay or her gameplay, or with a different game, or with a different situation in life. So yeah. There's also scientific evidences on the implication of video games in learning, like memorizing, content-specific knowledge, so memorizing names, date, formula, etc., as well as conceptual comprehension of, for example, if I take my personal experiences, there is a lot of historical concept and historical construct that that I have understood by playing historical themed video game like Age of Empire, or like Sid Meier's Civilization, or that forced me to understand some real life concept, some content specific knowledge concept, in order to be successful in that game. So when come the time, when come the in-class learning, I had some sort of an advantage over my colleague, because I knew stuff from playing video games that other students that don't play video games wasn't able to take advantage of. The ability to represent abstract concept within a real life situation, so transferring learnings, just like I discussed about, and the use of a video game title or a phenomenon that may occurs in, I don't even know if that's a word. I told myself that I was going to look upon that word before sending you that PowerPoint presentation, but I didn't do it. So I hope that that word does exist. So yeah, and the use of a video game title or a phenomenon that may occur in video games can be a common starting point for a debate or discussion between students. Like I gave the example of the representation of women or minorities in video games, in order to introduce ethical or historical themes with them. So it can, for example, be showing what we call a let's play video on YouTube. These videos of YouTubers playing video games and commenting their own performances. This is something that is very popular amongst today's kids. Sorry. So, and probably amongst your children. Yeah, and this is something that can be a common starting point for a debate or a discussion on that particular topic. So yeah, and the interactivity nature of video games make the experience even more immersive than watching a movie or a documentary, because this is the main difference between a video game and a movie, is that the player have the control of the story. It's like it's the same principle that than the traditional lecture that of a teacher speaking in front of a class, like I'm just doing right now, and a teacher that asks the student to think about particular situation so they can think and construct knowledge and a solution to that historical, social, cultural, etc., mathematical problem. And discuss with others about their in-game choices. So not only discuss about their experience, but discuss about their in-game, the in-game choices they made. Why have you, for example, if a student is playing Sid Meier's civilization, why the student is, for example, building a city beside a river? Is there any historical means to that action that the player have the decision that players have made in a in-game context? Is there any historical reasons, or can you relate to that experience with an historical period in time? From linear story to the infinite possibilities of an open world game, like for example Minecraft, where the social aspect takes a bigger part in the experience, and offers instant feedback over the player's decision. Sorry, which is basically the main advantage of playing video games, and why learning comes so fast with playing video games is the feedback is instant. If for example students are completing an exam, it takes time before students knowing if their answers are right or wrong. Time teachers take for to assess those work. So video games offers instant feedback, so player can adjust his or their decisions in real time. And finally, about its usage in class, author noted some factor that may foster the integration of video games to an in-class learning situation. For example, a clearly defined pedagogical intention, it's always beneficial. Video games objectives adjusted to the program and also to the students. Gameplay learning, learning how to use a video game shouldn't be an obstacle for the video game experience or activity, learning activity. Students are showing interest into the video games. This is another thing that we have to take in consideration, because it's not because I found a video games interesting that it will be the same for students. Just like humor, some of my jokes are are not some of my students don't find some of my jokes really funny, even though I'm finding myself funny, and this is the only thing that matters anyway. So yeah, and teachers have the required knowledge in order to properly use the video game, because video game is all about experience. Yeah, playing a video game, it's all about the experience. The outcome will be will depend on the experience, not on the game itself. The game itself places the set up an virtual environment to facilitate that learning, to generate, to put multiple conditions that are used by the players in order to succeed to the game, and in order to successfully learn. But fundamentally, it's the experience that is, generating those learning. It is not because, for example, it have been proven that Minecraft increases the problem-solving skills, but all depends on how those video games are used. And if I'm talking about, for example, the development of social skills, um, playing Call of Duty at home or League of Legends at home with other people does not does not you know yeah, sorry about that. Does not always have an impact on the development of those social skills. So some conditions must be respected in order to, yeah, develop those skills. So this is what conclude this final class on video games. And I did for my students. I did. I asked you quick questions for your last entry on that reflective logbook. So yeah, I will hand that the streaming right away. So thanks for watching.